People ask all the time, doesn't the Consumer Credit Protection Act limit the amount that the IRS can garnish from my pay to 15 or 25%? The short answer is no, that's completely incorrect. Here's the truth. The CCPA, or the Consumer Credit Protection Act, is going to limit ordinary garnishments from your pay. Things like Visa, MasterCard, car loans. Those types of creditors are limited to 25% of your pay. But here's the critical part. There's a carve out for the IRS that explicitly exempts them from those limits. Now, the CCPA also lists a 15% limitation for federal payments, but they're talking about student loans. So there's a limit of 15% that the government can garnish for defaulted student loans. But again, that it does not apply to the IRS. Even though it's federal, yes, but it's explicitly exempted. So if consumer protection laws don't apply to the IRS, then what does? The IRS goes by something called Publication 1494 when they're looking to determine how much you should be levied. 94 is going to be issued to your employer when the IRS sends a notice of levy to your company. That limitation is going to be based off of the number of dependents, your filing status, and your pay frequency. Your employer is supposed to share this information with you. You fill it out to help determine what's called your exemption amount. That's the basic amount that you get to keep, and the government gets everything else above the exemption. So how brutal can this be? Let's say you're single with no dependents and you make $2,000 every 2 weeks. You would keep about $600 and the IRS is going to keep approximately $1,400. And that's going to be about 70% of your paycheck that the government is going to get, and you get to keep the rest. That's a far cry from 15%, but it gets even worse the more money you make. So let's say you make $3,000 every 2 weeks instead of just $2,000. You're still going to keep the same $600 exemption. That doesn't change. But what does change is the amount that the IRS gets. They now get $2,400. So they're getting now over 80% of your paycheck, and a lot more obviously than 15%. So the more you make, the more they take, and there's no 15% cap. The reason that misinformation is really dangerous is that when people get a notice of intent to levy, they think, oh, the government's only going to take 15%. I can live off of 85. First of all, you probably can't. You probably can't live off of 85, but they're not going to take 15%. By the time that levy hits and you look at what's actually coming out of your paycheck, the government is taking anywhere from 15% all the way up to 80% of your pay. And that is something that's not sustainable for any family or business. By the time you realize the damage, you're now behind on rent, mortgage, car payments, everything, and it becomes more difficult to dig yourself out. If you're facing an IRS levy, give us a call at 1-877-LEVY-KING or go to our website, www.levyking.com.